The first sunrise on my new property should have been pure peace. The water stretched out like a sheet of glass, tinted with gold, and the dock creaked under my steps in that perfect way wood does when it carries history. I inhaled, thinking this was home, thinking I had finally left the noise of city politics and board meetings behind. But before the coffee in my hand had cooled, the nightmare walked up my driveway. Karen. She came stomping with 2 other board members trailing behind her like soldiers in an army no one had enlisted in. She didn't smile, didn't even introduce herself, just barked out, "This dock is non-compliant and must be removed immediately." I blinked at her, half expecting it was a bad joke. Non-compliant with what? I asked, gesturing at the sturdy structure that had stood longer than any of the houses nearby. "It violates HOA shoreline ordinances. You'll have 30 days to demolish it or face fines of $500 per day until it's gone." Her voice carried a rehearsed arrogance, the kind she had likely used to bully countless families into submission. The clipboard in her hand snapped shut like a verdict. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I watched the 2 men behind her neighbors, probably roped into this charade shift uncomfortably under my gaze. Even they seemed embarrassed by her performance. But what Karen couldn't know, what she had no clue about, was that my dock wasn't just a personal structure. By law, it fell under the direct oversight of the county Waterway office. And I wasn't just a homeowner. I was the newly appointed supervisor of this entire Waterway district. Every boat permit, every environmental review, every inspection within a 15-mile radius ran across my desk. I had moved here not just for the lake, but because my job demanded it. Karen had picked the wrong morning, the wrong dock, and the wrong person to attack. Still, I didn't tip my hand. Not yet. "I'll look into it," I told her calmly, sipping my coffee while her eyes narrowed like I had just given her a confession. She smirked, mistaking patience for weakness. "Good," she sneered. "I'll be back to check compliance." She marched off, leaving the faint stench of cheap perfume and entitlement in her wake. That night, as the crickets hummed and the water lapped at the shore, I pulled out my files. Regulations, permits, environmental impact studies, all of it was right there in my home office. And every single document proved not only that my dock was legal, but that the HOA had absolutely no authority over it. I even had letters of acknowledgement from the state confirming jurisdiction. If Karen wanted a war, I was going to give her one. Not with fists or shouting, but with truth so undeniable it would unravel her empire. The confrontation escalated within days. Karen showed up again, this time with a bright orange sticker she slapped onto one of the dock posts. Bold letters screaming "Condemned." Emily, my neighbor from across the lake, witnessed it all and stormed over. "You can't just tag people's property like this," she shouted. Karen turned on her, venom dripping from her words. "Stay out of this unless you want your garden cited too." Emily backed up, but gave me a look, half apology, half solidarity. That was when I knew this wasn't just about me. Karen had been terrorizing this neighborhood for years, using rules like weapons and compliance codes as her shield. The twist came when, a week later, the HOA called a community compliance meeting. I walked into the clubhouse and every head turned. Karen sat at the head of the table, arms folded, documents stacked high, smugness radiating like heat. She banged a gavel and declared, "We are here to address the non-compliant dock on Lot 7. That was me. She leaned back, satisfied, expecting me to beg or argue. Instead, I opened my briefcase and set down a thick binder. "Before we begin, I'd like to clarify jurisdiction," I said, sliding a letter across the table. Karen didn't touch it, so I read it aloud, my voice steady, filling the room. It was the official state appointment naming me Waterway Supervisor, with full authority over shoreline structures, docks, and environmental regulations. The room gasped. People leaned forward to see the seal, the signatures, the undeniable proof. Karen's face drained of color. But I didn't stop. I flipped through page after page: permits for the dock, environmental compliance reports, correspondence confirming exemptions. This dock doesn't answer to HOA bylaws. It answers to state law. And as the person responsible for enforcing that law, let me make this perfectly clear: your orders are not just invalid. They are illegal. The silence was broken only by the sound of someone stifling a laugh. Then another. Soon the room rippled with murmurs. Neighbors exchanging glances that said everything they were seeing Karen's crown crack in real time. But I wasn't done. I leaned forward, my voice sharper now. And if you want to keep pressing false claims against homeowners, I'll be opening an inquiry into every single fine you've issued, every dock you've harassed, every fence you've targeted, every garden you've threatened. I have the power to audit, and I won't hesitate. That was when the unexpected happened. One of her own board members, a man named Harris, stood up abruptly. "I warned you, Karen," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I told you this was overreach. You dragged us into this, and I'm not going down with you." He tossed his clipboard onto the table and walked out. Gasps followed him, and Karen sat frozen, her hands trembling. Karen's lips trembled as if her mouth wanted to form words, but nothing coherent came out. Her hands, so used to stabbing down fines and pointing fingers, now twitched uselessly against the gavel she still clutched. The silence in that clubhouse was different from before. It wasn't fear or submission anymore. It was awakening. The neighbors who once bowed their heads under her threats were now leaning forward, waiting to see her stripped of the power she had wielded like a weapon. Finally, she slammed the gavel down with a hollow crack. "This meeting is adjourned," she screeched, trying to regain control through volume. But no one moved. Not one chair scraped. Instead, a low murmur of disapproval rolled across the room like thunder building before a storm. A woman in the back raised her voice, sharp and unyielding. "You fined me $300 for having bird feeders. Was that illegal too?" Another man shouted, "You threatened to tear down my deck. Was that your fraud or Leonard's?" Dozens of voices piled on, an avalanche of anger Karen couldn't bury anymore. Her face turned crimson, sweat streaking her temples as she screamed, "You're all ungrateful. Without me, this place would be a dump. I made this community livable." But the laughter that followed gutted her like no police order ever could. Even the board members who once hid behind her authority now stared at the floor, shame written across their faces. I stepped closer, my binder still in hand. "Karen, this isn't leadership. This is extortion. You've bullied this community into silence for too long. And now the truth is out. And as Waterway Supervisor, I'll make sure every fraudulent citation and every illegal fine is investigated." That was when the twist struck like lightning. Officer Daniels entered the clubhouse not in uniform this time, but with a badge at his belt and a folder in hand. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, though his voice carried the weight of inevitability. "But we've received formal complaints and documentation of financial impropriety. Mrs. Karen, you'll need to come with me." The gasps echoed again, louder than before. Karen staggered back, clutching the chair beside her like it could hold her collapsing world. "You can't do this. I am the HOA. You have no right." She howled. Daniels raised the folder high enough for everyone to see. "I do have the right, ma'am. And so does the state. Fraud, harassment, trespassing, these are criminal matters. You're done." Her collapse wasn't graceful. She kicked the chair, cursed, flailed her arms as if clawing at invisible enemies. But when the cuffs clicked around her wrists, silence fell once more. The sight was seared into every eye in that room. The woman who thought she was untouchable reduced to a defendant before the entire neighborhood. She was led outside into the flashing lights of squad cars, her shrieks swallowed by the roar of a crowd that erupted in cheers. But Leonard, her quiet partner in corruption, wasn't spared either. Within days, investigators uncovered how he had siphoned HOA funds through bogus shoreline maintenance projects that never happened. He tried to flee, but was caught 2 counties over. His arrest splashed across headlines. The empire they had built together toppled in less than a week. And what rose in its place was something entirely new. The neighbors formed a cooperative council. Transparent and voluntary. Not forced under threat of fines. Instead of hiding indoors, families gathered on docks, hosted cookouts, and turned their yards into gardens free of surveillance. Emily's laughter carried across the water again, her healing no longer shadowed by constant harassment. Children ran along the lakefront without parents fearing another citation. The dock that Karen had tried to erase became a symbol, not just of resistance, but of freedom. The twist I hadn't expected came a month later. A neighboring community reached out, asking me to speak about what had happened. They too were under the thumb of an HOA president who abused power, and they wanted to know how we broke free. What started as one confrontation in a lakeside clubhouse began to ripple outward, inspiring others to stand their ground. The story made the local news, then regional, and soon people from across the state were asking questions about HOA authority. One dock, one morning, had become the spark for change. Standing on the dock at sunset weeks after Karen's arrest, I let the wood creak beneath me again. This time the sound was sweeter than ever. Not just because the lake was mine to oversee, not because the law was on my side, but because truth had spoken louder than arrogance. Communities don't thrive under fear. They thrive when people rise up, together, against those who abuse their power. So I ask you, was I right to bring it all into the open? To drag Karen's empire into the light where it crumbled for all to see? Or should justice have been handled quietly, behind closed doors, without the public spectacle? Share your thoughts. Because this isn't just about a dock or an HOA, it's about whether ordinary people dare to stand against bullies who pretend to rule.